welcome to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news, interviews, and race reviews. I'm your host, Idris.
And I'm Gabe.
Hot diggity dog, we've got a good one for you all today. I was thinking about what I was going to say, and like before we started, I was like, I'm going to do some kind of dog reference. So there you go. Hot diggity damn dog. How about that?
It sounds like you opened up the book of like podcast intros from like, the early onset days of podcasting where it's just like, it's the best way to start your intro is with a hearty greeting to your listeners. Say something like hot diggity dog. Howdy, y'all.
Make sure to make a post on your followers wall on MySpace. You'll be sure to
get that like and subscribe button. Smack it. The big hand hitting the blue button.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are a pod for the fam. We are a family-friendly podcast and also a podcast for the nerds, the dweebs, and the casuals. So
except for when Toto used his little curse the last episode, one our Drive to Survive season 5 discussion.
Yeah,
he had some very choice words for Christian Horner, and I do apologize for that.
You know what's messed up too? We told him, we were like, "Yo, this is a pod for the fam, so you can't be coming on here throwing around those kinds of words." But
I had to talk to Susie. I'm like, Susie, you have to talk to Toto. He's going off the rails. He's telling us that we can't use the bathroom and that he owns our tushies. I mean, I was like, this is inappropriate and unacceptable. No wonder Lewis Hamilton's thinking of leaving.
Absolutely. Speaking of Susie, can we just give a quick shout out to F1 Driver Academy?
Yes.
Yes. It is criminal how this racing series and these drivers and all the engineers and everyone working behind the scenes on that, they're just getting no attention, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
And what's frustrating is that it seems like the weekend that Monza was canceled, hopefully everyone is okay from that.
You mean Imola?
Imola, I'm sorry. Thank you. Right. Yeah. I think they both held the name of Italian Grand Prix at one point in time. So,
right. That's right.
Tomato. I've never liked that phrase, by the way, because no one really says tomatoes. And okay, anyways. So I don't know. They could have used that weekend to highlight and say, look, we have this awesome racing series going on and we really want to, show love to these women drivers and, get their names out there. Why not? Seems like a missed opportunity.
When the rain hits the sky and you can't get on track, that's Imola. That's Imola.
Yeah.
Okay, I had that brewing. No, I 100% agree. The other day I watched sort of the highlights from the races, and they do several things that I wish people could see. Instead of just doing like one big race, they effectively have 3 races, right? They do their qualifying. They do one race, and then they do a second race where the top 9 drivers are reverse grid.
Oh, that's dope.
And they run that race.
So dope.
Then they go back and they run the last race from the original grid position. So over the course of a period of time, you have a potential for 3 different, race winners. And they produced a lot of different race winners. Although Marta Garcia is kind of running away with it.
Oh, she's cleaning up.
And I've seen some of her on-track performances. It is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. One criticism that I do have, apart from them not being televised, is that I honestly think these women should be able to drive much faster cars than they're doing. I feel it feels kind of, I don't know, it feels a little, I don't want to say insulting, but it feels a little disappointing that they're just given these they kind of feel like just 2 steps up from a go-kart. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not to say they're slow. It's just they are noticeably slower than the F1 cars. And that actually is a great segue into talking about what we're here to talk about, which is tracks.
Yeah.
Because there is a specific element of a track that has to do with sort of power to weight ratio that will change sort of how it feels when you're on a track, and we'll get into more of that. But yeah, I definitely think, F1 Academy definitely needs to be televised, especially in races if things get canceled.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good targeted opportunity, right? And that would really, because people clearly have a hunger to see racing, right? And good on FIA, what they did this last weekend was to show just clips, I think full race replay of the 2005. Which Grand Prix was it? I know
Imola.
of Imola. Yeah.
And then it was 08 of Monaco on Sunday.
Which is fantastic. Yeah, that's cool. It's like they're digging into the vaults, Unlike the Disney Vault, they actually kind of allow people to go back and see their stuff. But
which reminds me, I was going to tell you, you had just briefly, before we popped on air, you were talking about wanting to watch NASCAR. And one thing I will tell you, that's something I did, and I actually started redoing it the other day because I was just, I kind of haven't been a while. When 2020 happened, F1 did this, where they were putting out all these archive races on YouTube, and so was NASCAR. I decided to watch the first televised Daytona 500 was in 1979.
Okay.
Dude, that is amazing to watch. It's on YouTube. It's like 3 hours long, but it just the whole sort of rough and tumble nature of I could tell why it was exciting. And apparently at the time when that was televised, part of the reason why it was so big is there was some other thing happening in the country where I think people were sort of inside, sort of glued to their televisions for some specific reason. I forget the historical context, but it just so happened that it was on that weekend, and so they had a huge televised audience for it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, they have pretty much all the Indy 500s up on YouTube somewhere to watch. And those are the ones that I was watching just to kind of see the progression of the cars. Thing. Yeah. And it is hella exciting. More content for everybody, please. Just bring us in.
Absolutely. And if there's some NASCAR stands and some IndyCar stands out there, and even Formula E stands, we have plans to talk about each of these racing series because they are all really foundational to what motorsports is, right? And other racing series too. Let us know what your favorite races are. What would be a good entry point for people to watch this, right? Much like Drive to Survive was a really good entry point for a lot of people to come in and start watching Formula One. These other racing series exist. They may not have a Drive to Survive, but, just crowdsourcing ideas about you should watch this race because this happened and this happened. That would be great to hear. That's a request from one motorsport fan to another. So hit us up.
Yeah, well, we'll just wait to see when Netflix inevitably makes an IndyCar version or a NASCAR. We just have to come up with a name. So
I was just going to say
Drive
that.
to Survive. Maybe it's NASCAR's is I don't know, Turn to Burn.
I got one for IndyCar.
What?
Because they drink milk after they win the IndyCar, right?
Right, the Indy 500, yeah.
Yeah, if they're the Indy 500, if they're lactose intolerant, that's not good, right? So it's got to be something like drink the milk, gotta run, or something like that,
Drink to runs.
drink to run.
Yeah, there's a lot of fascinating things about that. I found out. It's we should have an episode on the Indy 500, but I did see these things that are just I'm saying they're fascinating. I did not know about recently. So the people that bring the milk in for the potential drivers, they have it in a bulletproof case and
my God, are you serious?
Gold handcuffs attached to the case, and it's
what?
It's all it's it's the nuclear football or something. I mean, I love it.
More secure than Fort Knox.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's so ridiculous, but that's just that's so weird and silly and wonderful. Yeah, just why? But and all the drivers release what drinks they want to what kind of milk, 2% whole or
coconut.
Apparently, Grosjean requested
almond
milk. So
okay, my man.
Yeah. Oh no, the alternatives there. That's a big no-no. Apparently.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What if you're lactose intolerant?
Well, I guess according to our friend Elizabeth Blackstock, I asked her about that, and she said that most drivers, because there's a big cash prize involved, most drivers are it's kind of worth the risk. I also think you could probably just pour it over your face and it looks like you're drinking it, but you're just
it's so tasty,
letting it run all over. You just do that the coaches at the end of a football game, they don't just drink the Gatorade. It just gets dumped on them. I think
that's true. That's true.
Maybe they'll take sort of a sip and then I feel I could fake it. I could fake it if I needed to because I have a problem with dairy. So I would.
I mean, if you are a human being and you are above the age of 20, you will have lactose intolerance of some sort. That's that's just what it is.
Yeah. No. See, the secret thing is though, goat's milk does not affect me as much as regular cow's milk does. So I could do a goat's milk.
Bougie.
That would be. Dude, my stomach is calling the shots here.
Gabe is the bourgeoisie, everyone.
My stomach's calling the shots. If I ever want to have cereal again, I'm just going to have to drink goat's milk with it. It's just the code of the road at this point now.
Oh, see, that's a good name for a racing series, too. We got Drive to Runs and Code. Yeah, what was it again?
Code of the road.
Code of the road. I like it.
Speaking of roads.
Yeah, speaking of roads, let's just dig right into this because like we're really excited about this, y'all. We mentioned this, I think, several episodes back that, talking about track designs and the circuits and like the history around all of that is just so important to what Formula One is or what any motorsport is, right? Like you can't just be racing these cars on a dirt road, right? Because death, right?
They do. Sometimes they do little promo things, right?
Sure. Yeah, but that Red Bull that's all spiced up and doing like, donuts in the dirt. That's not a real.
They love doing that at Red Bull, just like putting dirt tires on the car and just having them. They did that with when Coda was being built. They had like Sebastian out there in dirt tires running it. Yeah.
Or his double, like the Stig.
Could you imagine an F1 car running Pikes Peak? That would be terrifying, honestly.
Or drifting down Mount Akina with the Akina Speed Stars.
They did. Somebody did like a cross promotional video with that, I think, where they had like Takumi driving, and then all of a sudden like an F1 car comes up behind him, and he's like chasing him down the track. I'm trying to remember where I saw that, but I'm pretty sure somebody did.
That's good. Back on the rocks, baby. Okay, so
it's on fire.
So we are big Initial D fans, so
we're coming up with episode ideas. That's an episode idea.
That's an episode idea. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so Back to Tracks. That'd be a good album name too. Back to Tracks. It made me think of Amy Winehouse, Back to Black. There's so many thoughts going on in my head right now.
Right.
But anyways, okay. So track designs, right? We have several tracks on the calendar. They weren't all designed at the same time, right? And so you have to think about the evolution of the sport, right? Just with how fast these cars are getting, how long they're getting, how heavy they are, right? And how that affects the track and the driving surface that they're running on. And then you also have to think about modern manufacturing or road production processes, right? Like all of that stuff kind of plays together. And you like ultimately the goal of a track is to produce really good racing in a location, right? That location may have different kinds of things going on as far as the environment is concerned, as far as the weather is concerned, as far as like the local materials that you can use to build that track. So how does this all play together? Well, that's what we're here today to talk to you guys about. And it's really, really fun and exciting stuff. So Gabe, let me just kick it off. What does track design mean to you? Is there something particular that's really key that you're like, this is the element of what track design is really about?
Well, I think the answer to that question for me is really embedded in sort of the history of racing itself. Because obviously, like you think of racing, you think of the cars, but people don't often immediately think of like, where are they racing these things?
Right.
And way back in sort of the dawn of the, mass production of the automobile, you'd have these sort of events of things that, like, for example, there were land speed records were happening in California on the beach or like in Florida on the beach because it was a long flat surface that they could run the cars, right? That were not,
right.
They weren't just like, we didn't immediately have paved roads. So in order to like achieve a high level of speed, you needed a consistent surface. They still sort of do that in the Bonneville Salt Flats. And like early on in Europe, there were no purpose-built circuits. I mean, I think the earliest circuits you could sort of say were like sort of chariot racing tracks in like Italy. Like there were like
sure.
circles, like they think like Judah Ben-Hur, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But really the sort of start of a lot of that was, you would have these rallies where people would get these cars and it was like you drive from here to here as fast as you can. And whoever got there the fastest, they'd have a co-driver and he'd get out and fix the car if there was a problem, and all of these sort of things. And I think that there is as these cars started to get faster, there was this sort of desire to have everything kind of in a very specific, consistent place that people could return to that also was just, sort of still a product of what the environment was, know? So like even every, if you think historically to all of the tracks that we know today, there are two elements, and I think these are elements that are still important. They were products of their environment in a sense that even the track layout was dictated by the natural flow of like, what the land was doing.
Yeah.
So for example, Spa goes through the trees, and it used to go way through the trees. Same with like Hockenheim, where they were just these roads that were just country roads, you know, that were like, you know, paved, but like they were just going off into like little villages, and like, you know, there's videos of little cafes where these just cars are flying past. They had this long circuit, you know, run. But they also were based off of a result of utilizing an infrastructure that had been built for another purpose. So for example, Silverstone is built on an old aerodrome that was built during World War II to, you know, for fighters, right? They had this big like open airfield facility, and they said, well, what are we going to do with this? And it's like, well, hey, let's make a racetrack out of it. You know, so it was sort of repurposed in that way. Nürburgring, same sort of thing. The Nürburgring was designed originally as a sort of test road for like German vehicles and development during, you know, World War II era. And then so after the war, that's exactly kind of what it continued to being, but for specifically like for racing events. So like it had just these green, you know, they call it the green hell because it's got a bajillion turns. It's super dangerous. You know, now it's used for testing sports cars and for like doing endurance races, events, and everything like that.
Yeah.
So for me, like when I think of what makes a really, really good track, to me, the most important things are just the natural environment that it's in. Yeah. And also just the sort of context historically, or just like what character it originally had. And as we'll go into down the line, I think that there are certain tracks that are very, very much lack any kind of character. And I think part of that is because they're all on flat surfaces. Yeah. And they're made with such a formula that's just very cookie cutter in a way that just does not produce anything that feels interesting.
Would you say that they're made with one formula?
Yes. 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 It is one formula
to rule them all.
To rule, yes. Yes, one formula to rule them all.
As you were talking about like the historical context of like the tracks and like their width and whatnot, like that reminded me of a quote that I heard where the modern day road cars and our freeways and everything that we use to transport things on land has been dictated by the width of 2 horse butts, right? Mm-hmm. Going all the way back to like thousands and thousands of years ago, like in ancient Rome and Greece, where people would have their double horses up front, like pulling a cart, right? And like that is the approximate width of a car, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's just what the roads were. And those roads were laid out that way, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting to think about it through that lens.
Yeah, and a chariot was like the first sports car. You think about it.
There you go.
There was no luggage space. Yep. Okay. It was like 2 passengers, and it had 4 horses in the front. So like it had double the horsepower. It had none of the space.
Oh man.
Chariots are the first sports cars. I'm just saying. All of them were pretty much convertibles too. So they're all cabriolets.
So I'm fully expecting a Photoshop chariot for this episode when we drop this.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna Photoshop Lewis Hamilton on Judah Ben-Hur's
wearing his Air Force Abrahams. So I think one of the, when we're talking about tracks, you have to understand that there's going to be different kinds of tracks, because for these reasons we've just laid out, right? There's historical elements, there are environmental concerns, there are material concerns, right? And the way that we can categorize and classify these tracks is using a metric that we use, or we call the track grade system, or I should say the FIA uses that. Right. And that is based on the power to weight ratio of the vehicles that are allowed to drive on those circuits. So, Gabe, you want to give us a little bit of background on this track grade system?
Yeah, so when I was doing my research on this, it was a complete revelation to me, because it never really anything that I had thought of. I mean, when you think of sort of the way tracks are sort of measured, you think like, okay, well, sure, it's got to be, maybe it's like got to be a certain length. Like if you're just guessing, it's got it can't be too narrow, if it's got to be wide enough, there's got to be a place for the cars to be and everything. But the one thing that really hit me was that idea of that power to ratio sort of thing. And the more that I thought about it, it really does make sense.
Yeah.
Why you have to have these certain things in place, because the best way to think about this, and everybody can relate to this. So imagine if you're on the highway, right? Highway is like 4 lanes across. Okay. All the cars around are going the same speed. There's no immediate 90-degree turns or anything like that. It's all like sort of really smooth turns. And so when you're driving at 70 miles an hour on the highway, everything feels normal. It feels like if you feel sort of, you're not thinking about the amount of speed that's going past you.
Right.
However, if you were going 70 miles an hour down a side street, that would feel way different.
Yeah.
That would be terrifying because suddenly you're on a narrow road. It's not long and smooth. Everything around you is stationary.
Yeah.
There's no areas for you to slow down or pull off. Like suddenly you are boxed in this way that feels very uncomfortable. And that's essentially the same sort of thing. If there is a portion of a track where the turn that you would take is if a normal road car would take it at a certain speed, obviously a race car is going to be taken at a way faster speed. And so because of that, there needs to be a sufficient amount of track width. There needs to be a runoff areas. It can't be too narrow and too short because there's not only is there a safety problem, but there's also like that psychological element to it. Which is why it's so interesting that the cars will still race. I think it also explains why street circuits feel a lot faster than big.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you have a focal point of you're seeing stationary objects on the road as the cars are flying past, but also just because of the nature of everything feel a lot more enclosed, a lot narrower,
and it's tunneling you in.
So essentially the FIA has grades for certain tracks. The main numbers go from 1 to 4. And so the tracks that modern day F1 cars are going to run on are going to be a grade 1. Grade 1 basically means it has the maximum amount of power to weight ratio, obviously it's not only factors. So it has proper facilities, proper track length and width and everything. So we'll go into that in a second. But just based on the power to weight ratio, the number 1 track is where the modern ones run. Number 2 is more you can do a slightly slower kind of sports car series, endurance car series, but also former F1 cars from previous years, and some historical F1 cars can race on grade 2 tracks. And then as it goes down, it starts to change. So grade 3 is Formula 3, Formula 4, Formula 2 can run on those possibly. Sports cars, some vintage racers. 4 is maybe a few vintage cars, some sports cars, but maybe cup cars, things of that nature. And there are examples of these different kinds of tracks across the board. And then there's also 5 and 6, but 5 and 6 kind of come in. There's very specific ones. So 5 and 6 would be rally cross staging. Where there's no speed. It's all just tight little, mazes. Or they have a thing that's called grade 3E, which is specifically for Formula E. So that they can run in those tracks, but a higher formula wouldn't be able to. And there's the Belgium airport circuit and things of that nature fall into that category.
Yeah.
And so essentially part of the reason why they have this grading system at number 1 is because the FIA and Formula 1 as an organization is trying to make a conscious effort to have a very specific set of rules and regulations in order to maintain that sort of mythos of the pinnacle of motorsport. Because if they could just run anywhere, then it would almost feel what's so special about this race series if everybody can run in these things. So the idea that Formula Ones can only run on a certain kind of track, and it's not all bluster. These things are incredibly fast and incredibly dangerous. So much so that apparently I heard this recently that when F1 cars and MotoGP cars run on the same track, there's actually a problem the MotoGP guys have, because the downforce on the F1 cars is so significant that it actually ripples the track. And so when the MotoGP guys are driving on it, they're just
oh yeah.
And so they're just we'll repave the surface, and then they can do it. And then F1 comes back and they're they repaved the surface.
Yeah, lay it down. Yeah.
And they just ripple the track again. So
and then also the rubbering of the track too. That's a whole nother thing that they'll have to deal with.
Right,
being on four wheels versus 2.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's essentially kind of in a nutshell. The grading system it's got a lot of factors, but the main performance factor is that power to weight ratio and the way that it sort of gets applied to those racing circuits to not only be proper for the sport to actually conduct, but also to be safe and function well enough.
Yeah, no, and the other note that we have here too is that you just can't use any material to produce a racing circuit, right? Like you have to be very particular about what kind of material you're using to build a track, right?
Yes.
I think one of the prime examples was Miami last year, right? Because Miami, that was the debut of that circuit, and there were issues with the drivers being able to properly lay down rubber on the track because of the material, the limestone that they were using that was in the actual concrete that was laid out. So that prevented drivers from actually being able to get good traction on the track. And we saw that again this season where, the rain came down. I think it was after quali and like washed away all of the rubber that had been laid down. So then come race day, the drivers have to come in again and then lay down new rubber. And then by the time you get good racing on the track, it's like halfway through the race already, right?
Which is also, like we said, why the hard tires ended up working better than the softs, because the softs were just getting torn apart because they were there's too abrasive of a surface, and the hards were a lot more durable, so they were able to last. One note on racing track surface that I want to just mention really quickly. It's actually related to Indy, and this is just fascinating to me and also just horribly dangerous. In the 1930s and 40s, there were tracks that were literally made of wood.
Oh my God.
And if you can imagine these cars driving at like, maybe 170, 100, whatever miles an hour around a wooden track, the wood was just tearing apart and it was splintering. And so they would get like chunks of wood embedded in their like foreheads and in their faces.
Dude,
and they
that's
had to,
so
like,
metal.
pull pliers to like pull them out.
Oh my God.
And then to make things even more intense, the tracks getting torn up, there would be holes underneath. And kids would go under the track as a thing, and they'd stick their head out the holes and like watch
little whack-a-moles.
Yeah, and so
oh my God,
you're playing like whack-a-mole at like 150 miles an hour, but like the little moles were like children, like trying to get close to the track.
Oh my God!
When Indy was built, it was built as a brick track, and of course, brick was even. I mean, it was better. Like, it was still like just if you've ever driven down a cobbled brick road.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Imagine that's just they're just you're just all over the place. But now they obviously they eventually actually properly resurfaced. Indy still retains the start finish line. Is still it's still the original bricks, and apparently all the bricks they pulled from the track they just dumped in like a nearby lake or something. And every year people go in, they grab a brick.
That's dope.
And over the winter the water literally like recedes and then pulls bricks back up, so it's almost like an endless supply, because they had like something like 4 million bricks that were making that, so they were just all dumped them in one lake, and it was
all right. So I gotta say that when we go to Indy, we will get bricks for ourselves. Like that. That's dope.
Yeah, I want at least one Indy brick would be.
2 Indy bricks for me, sir.
2. Can I have that? That and a phosphate, please. Yeah, I don't know why. It's to say that's when I think of Indy. Like I think of milk. I think of like guys in like straw, like circle hats, being like, "We're here to see the Indy 500, the seventh running." Kind of like my newsreels thing.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
kind of the feel of that,
Yeah.
But.
I think something we want to call out or call attention to. We spoke about this on our safety episode, but as these tracks have been designed and the track evolution has designed over the years, so has a safety on these tracks, right? I mean, we used, just like you mentioned previously, there used to be hay bales, then they went to metal barriers, tire barriers, and now we're at Tech Pro barriers, which are, probably the safest that we can get to at this point. Minus a few other things we could do, maybe like runoff areas, that kind of thing. But this goes hand in hand with how tracks are designed now. We think a lot about the safety element, so that's going to have some kind of effect and impact upon how we actually go ahead and swoop through like the natural environments that we're building, if we're building in like more of an area with like more topology versus an area that's kind of flat, because at that point you can just build it out however you want.
Right. Well, here's something I want to ask you. When it comes to track layout and design, and also coinciding with safety, do you think that, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, do you really think that when designing a track, should the cars be ultimately doomed if they make a slight error and run off track? Because that's like I have that's why like I sometimes have a problem with
Yeah.
gravel traps, because yes, gravel traps are effective in slowing a car down. They can be.
Because you go from 100 to 0 real quick.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like if they're incapable of, if they just run out just a little bit, you know, and they don't damage the car necessarily, like the floor is not really undamaged, but they just get beached, then suddenly it's like, well, they can't just be pushed back out on track. They have to like it's just their race is over.
Yeah.
And there's something about that just still really bothers me. I mean, I know that there's a certain amount of safety concern as far as like rejoining the track. Like you can't just have like people coming over and like, you know, running out on track during a green flag and like pushing the car back out. You know, I know there's rules against that, but like, I don't know, part of me feels like they could just do like a virtual safety car and like, you know, just have like a bump vehicle, you know, just kind of like give it a nudge or something. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny that you bring this up because, we're going to talk later about one of the most prolific designers of tracks, and that's Hermann Tilke. And he has, you know, he's been called out about this kind of stuff. My personal take is that I don't think there should be gravel traps because I think that's a bit too much, right? Ultimately, we want to see racing and, you know, positions gained on track or lost on track, right? Not because someone beached the car, right? Because I think beaching the car means that someone is racing right on the edge and they lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be punished. You know, they don't get to compete in the race anymore because of that. What I think we should do is have like a tiered grading system as you go off into the runoff, right? Like when you immediately go off, it's like level 1 where it's going to eat into your tires a little bit, right? But you can still get back on track. Level 2, you're all the way out there, and well, I guess it should just be like an equal grading system the entire way. Now I'm thinking about it. Effectively, what I'm trying to say is if you go off the track, you should pay a price, right? Your tires should get eaten up a little bit. And I think that's good 2 ways because it allows you to come back on the track if you went off because you're right on the edge, right? If you're trying to overtake or something. But if you are one of these drivers who likes to kind of, you know, use the runoff area in order to maintain advantage, that kind of thing, you're going to pay a price for that. And it will come back to you because you're going to have to pit that much sooner, right? Or you're going to have to pit when you didn't need to pit at all. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my stance on it.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck between punishing it, like, well, not like a driver having a consequence for going past the limit, but also not completely destroying their race if they do.
Yeah.
And that's where it's just like street circuits are dangerous there because there are walls.
Yep.
If you like go off, I mean, you know, there's something exciting about being on the edge and everything like that. And, you know, and I think that in certain corners, like if it's like a right-hand corner, slow corner, you know, that's fine. I don't think that there should ever be walls in like a high-speed swoop.
No.
Why Jeddah makes me nervous every time I see it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, I think that their solution of, you know, having track limits where they punish drivers by like a 5-second penalty feels very aggressive to me. Because sometimes if somebody just runs wide, you know, I know they get like a couple of opportunities to, you know, not do that. But like if somebody runs wide, whether they're pushed wide or something, and all of a sudden they get a 5-second penalty, like 5 seconds is way more of a penalty than what just running off the track that brief moment was going to do. And that can just completely destroy somebody's like podium finish just for a simple mistake. And I don't think somebody should be punished for trying to find the limits of adhesion or, you know, like what they can do with the car, you know, because I think there's a difference between somebody deliberately cutting a track where they didn't need to and gaining an advantage and then not getting it back, or somebody who's just like pushing the limits of the car, just skips over that line and just goes wide just a little bit. It's an ongoing conversation, but I think it is inherently tied into track design because if you have places where the cars are allowed to push that limit comfortably, but not put them in danger or not risk them going into a gravel trap if they get it wrong, I think is something that really needs to be considered going forward because that's what you don't want to see that. I would rather see cars run off track and rejoin than go into a gravel trap. You know?
Yeah. It's almost like there needs to be a ratio of like, all right, if I have like a strip of land, there needs to be a ratio of allowable track width to like runoff area, right? And I think if you do something like that, that could help determine what that could be. But you'd have to grandfather in some legacy tracks, and that's a whole discussion in and of itself, though.
Right.
But I'm with you, though. All right, so we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about two iconic tracks on the F1 calendar, Monaco and Spa. So Monaco, that is F1, right? That race is definitely like the glitz and glam and like the valor of what Formula One represents, and Spa is as well too. Just because I think Spa produces some of the best racing, man. Like through Eau Rouge, ooh, man.
Well, it does. There's definitely been a lot of moments I remember from Spa specifically. I mean, like Kimi Räikkönen flying through the straightaway where there was just a bunch of smoke. I mean, that was dangerous as hell, but it was also incredibly badass to watch.
Yeah.
Or like Rosberg and Hamilton coming together at the end of the straight.
Oh man.
Like there was lots of really crazy stuff that happens. I mean, not to say that Spa can't be processional. And part of the thing is with Spa is that so there are specific rules when grading a track that it has to be a maximum. It has a maximum and a minimum length that it can be. The majority of tracks on the calendar fit that length, fine, except for two, Monaco and Spa. Spa is only like 4 meters longer than it's technically supposed to be.
That's so funny.
Which is crazy, right? I mean, it used to be way longer, you know, like it used to just go way out into the forest. Yeah. But it was shored up. And so because of that, it also too, there's another regulation where the start finish line and the first corner has to be a certain distance. Spa's is like actually technically 4 meters short of that.
Man,
isn't that weird how it's like the length is 4 meters too long, but the straight is like 4 meters too short? Yeah. But because it has a history of running this sport specifically, and also a history of other sports, they have a addendum to the rules where they're like, well, if you've already been running this sport previously for a long time, they kind of make an exception to that rule. Right. And I honestly think like 4 meters is not. Yeah, it's not a huge distance. And it's Spa. The thing that makes Spa so special, I mean, there's two reasons. One, it's always a potential for rain at Spa, and rain races are always more interesting.
Yep, the great equalizer.
It's a great equalizer. And two, the Eau Rouge corner is just
it's stunning.
It's stunning. It's terrifying when you're like playing a game. Like I don't know if I've ever actually gone through that like. That bend properly. I usually just like whatever, and I just go across the just go straight across the thing. And I was like, force is not going to penalize me. But yeah, like the elevation change, like I think we like to say that some of the best tracks feel like roller coasters. Yes. That is like a roller coaster corner. Yeah. Just the sudden elevation. I also love that camera angle when the helicopter's right at the top and you just see the cars going like swoop, swoop. And it's just,
dude, there is something about the elevation change from like a natural environment and just utilizing that. It is just so like it's beautiful, right? It's so I don't know. There's something really poignant about just this is what we've been given. This is what we'll use, and we will just roll with it, right? Like it's beautiful. I love it.
Let's talk about Monaco a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that's the other one we mentioned.
Yep. I think one of the big complaints about Monaco is that it's very processional, and I don't think people are wrong in saying that, right?
There's a reason for that.
But there's a reason for that, right? Today's cars are just so big, right? I think that is probably the key determining factor in just how hard it is to overtake in Monaco now. Yeah. If we went back to like the late 80s, early 90s spec cars, maybe you'd be able to overtake a bit, but you probably would have to go a bit further back, honestly.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this before. We talked about the Joker lap thing. You know, Monaco is the exception in that rule, in the opposite direction that Spa is, where Monaco is shorter than it's supposed to be. It's also narrower than it's supposed to be. But because, like I said earlier, when these tracks were originally being made, like when they were originally going out and doing Grand Prix races, they were just, you know, what did they have? They had streets. And so they're just like, well, let's run on a street, you know. And Monaco was just such a beautiful and kind of like picturesque place to host a race that they were just like, well, let's do it. It raced in 1929 once, and then like they didn't do much of anything there until the 1950 Grand Prix, and it's been there ever since. And I think that I would agree. I think that they should try and modify Monaco a little bit. They should find a way to expand the track a little bit, run a little bit further into another street just to add a little bit extra length to increase the lap time, to, you know, possibly create some different passing opportunities. If they don't want to do a full Joker lap, just make the laps longer. I know the spending is a part of the issue here, but I wish that the FIA would grant a special exception for creating like a Monaco spec vehicle where they already sort of do that. Like all the cars are having much bigger wings because you need more downforce around Monaco because you don't need the top speed because the speed is not a factor. It's all the cornering speed, the cars that are going to be a lot more draggy are going to do a lot better this track, I feel like it would be really interesting if they were just able to make almost like a 7/8 sized version of the cars that they're running now, that have just keep the engine, maybe keep the tires, just make them narrower and shorter, just shrink them up a bit so that there is a more easier way to pass around Monaco. I just think that obviously that requires literally creating a whole new one-off car for that, and so the spending would be it'd be catastrophic. So
it would just be nice in general for the sport to trend that direction.
Well, it would, and that's why I think that for Monaco specifically, if you really want to keep it interesting, you got to look to other things. So expand the track, do reverse race grids. If you're going to do a sprint race at Monaco, do something like do a reverse grid. Like that's going to make it interesting all of a sudden. You got to find creative ways to do it. So I still think it's beautiful. I still think it's a good race. It's still enjoyable to watch. Even if it feels a little stagnant at times, there's still a lot of drama that can happen at Monaco and a lot of really interesting passes, but it's also just for the visual aesthetic. I would much rather watch a processional Monaco than an exciting Miami, if I'm being honest. I'm just saying.
Charles Leclerc, he fought for the championship last season.
No.
Why did LL Cool J say that, man?
He might be the shortest man on the grid. It's like, dude, what?
But he's the biggest in our hearts.
That's what he should have said.
He was the breakout star of Drive to Survive. It's just like,
Gunther Steiner.
And it's hilarious that will.i.am is up there conducting this string quartet, and you see they did a music video for it too.
Oh, okay.
It is so cheesy.
Okay.
It's just, it's got Lil Wayne in it or something, which this is a little off topic, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I recently have a new song obsession that I did not know existed, but now I'm so glad that it did.
What is it?
Skilo's I Wish.
Ooh.
I wish I was a little bit taller.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl look good. I would call her. I was like, blew my mind. I was just like, that is so good.
Was that your first time hearing that song?
Yeah.
Bro,
I listened to
failed
it
you
5 times in a row, and I was just like, how have I not known that this thing existed? It sounds like a Childish Gambino song that was made in the mid 90s. Like that sample in the background. Oof. Man.
You know what? This is a new. You guys are getting brainstorming this episode. We're gonna start off every episode and give our song of the week, what we've been bumping. Because I think that's a little spicy, a little different to let y'all know what we're up to.
We should also take some listener submissions too.
Yes,
that might not be a bad idea
because we're definitely a music duo. Also, we have our Spotify playlist, so listen to that too.
Yes,
we put all the songs we get recommended there.
Yes. Yeah. We do have a link to that in our bio, right? Don't we?
We will with this episode.
We will. We will. Well, speaking of things that are not relevant that much anymore, let's talk about F1 racing in Indianapolis. Now, we did talk about this a little bit, and I think was it our safety episode or was it our controversies episode?
Yeah.
And you want to kind of give them a little primer or refresher on sort of idea kind of what happened? Yeah.
Indianapolis 500.
Drink your milk.
But not coconut milk because we don't do that trash around here.
Sorry, Max. Oh, that's it. If you imagine, you think if Max ran the Indy 500 and won, he would request coconut milk?
He would. He absolutely would. He would take the milk and just pour it off the side.
Water, but whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Lewis would definitely be drinking his alternative milk. He would not be drinking that milk.
Yeah.
He would hold the bottle of milk and then
they would cancel him right on the podium.
Yeah. He'd give prayer hands to the milk and say thank you, bless up. Still I rise. With the Indianapolis track in 2005, the track surface was diamond ground. So what this did, this actually created like little divots and grooves in the track surface. And this created an issue specifically with the Michelin tires. And what was happening is these tires would be blowing out, right, due to lateral forces. So when I say a lateral force, right, imagine you are a tire, right, or you're just driving a car and you're driving straight, right? Those tires are experiencing just axial loads, right? So they're in the direction of its movement, right? Now, a lateral load would be if suddenly your car were hit by wind from the left to the right, and then your car is going to the left, or your car is going to the right. There is a side load, right? That's 90 degrees to you driving the car, right? And that load is being felt by the tire. So there was enough of a lateral load that actually began eating into these tires, and then that's what was causing this issue where they would just blow out, right? So several constructors on the grid were utilizing the Michelin tires to the tune that only 6 cars who were using the Bridgestone or the Firestone tires were actually able to race.
Yeah,
right?
6 tires. That's 3 teams.
That's 3 teams.
3 teams were using Bridgestone tires, which, by the way, Bridgestone's subsidiary in America is Firestone. And Firestone had data using the Indianapolis because of the Indy cars, because they run in Indianapolis and they use Firestone tires at the time. So they had the data that was able to know what the track surface was like with those lateral loads. And the lateral loads wasn't, I mean, like wind is definitely a great way to think of it from like a practical perspective, but like the physical perspective of the lateral load is because the banking on Indy was intense. Like
it's way more steep, yeah. So it's way more acute.
Steepness of it. So that is literally the gravity is trying to pull the car downward toward the inside of the track, and that is what's creating the lateral push on the cars, on the tires. So basically, yeah, they tried all these different things to try and get around it, like a chicane in between the banking, having the Michelin tires just run through the pit lane rather than go through the banking. You know, all sorts of solutions. Nothing could really have come up with it, and they basically literally after the formation lap, Michelin runners, which was basically the majority of the field, just turned right in because there was like, well, we can't run this race safely. So they didn't want to put anybody's life at risk. I mean, Ralph Schumacher blew out in practice, and that's where they were like seeing this problem. They're just like, oh no. Yeah. And so that kind of goes to show where not all racetracks and not all surfaces are equal. And like each of them has some different unique quality to it, from wood surface with a bunch of, flying debris, toothpicks hitting people in the face, to a brick surface.
I'm just imagining Mad Max as they're driving. It's just like, just wood chips in their face.
Yeah. You have like Christian is suddenly Lord Humongous. It's going to walk away. Let Max through. We want the gasoline. So basically, it went from all these to different evolutions, but like for that surface, the diamond grinding process works for that track in a sense of making it as smooth of a surface as possible. Yeah. And just that knock-on effect is just the tires have to compensate, right?
Right.
And I think that that's something also that comes into play, which is why we have different tire grades every time we go to a different track, because it's not just because of the length of the circuit, but it's also because of the environment as far as its temperate zone, and also the surface itself of the track.
Right.
And so you have places that have more sun exposure, you have places that have more rubber on the track, some that have less. And so all of those have to be dictated depending on the tire that is on there. And so Pirelli has all this data. It's why it runs tire tests. It has its hands in all of the race teams and all of their data. And all of that is shared between Pirelli and those respective teams, because it's best to have that data shared rather than be like, oh no, this is for us.
Yeah.
It's like for the sake of the sport, safety, performance,
safety.
everything.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So our next little shift here that I want to talk about when it comes to race. So obviously we talk about race design, we talk about surfaces, what works, what doesn't work, but who literally puts the pencil to the paper? Or the clicks to the screen, or
to the CAD tool,
what have you? Because these tracks don't just it's not like somebody just throws a spaghetti noodle on a piece of paper and it's like, there's your track.
They might.
Maybe that's his secret. This this madman, this villain of Formula One race design, apparently. Idris, let's tell us about Mr. Hermann Tilke.
Hermann Tilke. Yeah, this guy is probably the most famous track designer for Formula One, and I think just motorsports in general. First off, I've got to say that This man is only 68, but he sounds like he's like almost 100 based on like the accomplishments. And it's like, no, seriously, right? Like think about all the tracks that he's like touched as far as design and renovations and building them from scratch goes. The first time I heard about him like several years back, I think it was a Chain Bear video that I saw back in 2019, which I would highly recommend watching if you want to get more background on this, specifically Tilke tracks. When I first read into him, and I was just like, whoa, this guy has done a lot. And clearly he is from like the 1930s or 40s. And then you see that, oh, actually he's still alive today and actually fairly young. So it's actually, it's pretty surprising. So here's something really funny from his Wikipedia page. So Tilke is one of 4 designers recognized by the FIA, but has, with the exception of the Silverstone redesign in 2010, been the only one to be commissioned to design Formula One tracks. To which I say, what kind of dirt does this man have?
What's
on some people?
Yeah, what secret deal has he struck that he gets exclusive monopolistic rights over designing F1 racetracks? Like, it is very silly. Honestly, you'd think that there should be a sort of diverse amount of people creating it.
You would think.
Like, but just one guy apparently is the one who's just putting all these things together. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of people out there that agree with me. I don't know what special sauce this guy has that like makes it so that like his tracks are just best. Like maybe it's just because he knows how to do the work and like other people like slack in some other way. I mean, I don't know. But here's the thing though. Would you rather have one person designing a track or a track designed by a committee? Because that's how you get a camel.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. But, you know, just some of the tracks that Hermann Tilke has designed, and I think this is from scratch. You have Sepang International Circuit. I think it's actually Sepang International Circuit,
No,
Bahrain.
Sepang.
Yeah, Sepang. Okay,
Yeah, it's
Bahrain International Circuit, Shanghai, Istanbul, Valencia Street, Marina Bay, Yas Marina, Korea, and Bud International Circuit. I mean, these are some of these are pretty iconic.
There's good ones, and there's some okay, and then there's some what.
So overall, this list is mid. If you average it out, this guy, there's a lot when it comes to Hermann Tilke. Like some people love him, some people hate him. You know, he has designed in some capacity 53 tracks, and this is not all F1, right? So there's like GT tracks, there's karting tracks, you know, other racing series, that kind of thing. And I think it's fair to say this is probably his design firm. It's not him just coming in and just like spaghetti, you know. And
he comes in, it's like, I was eating pasta the other day. And
it was
I left
hot.
this one on the plate. Do this. It's like and it's like that's how the Malaysian Grand Prix circuit was made.
Did you imagine? He's having pad thai and he's like,
I did see somebody, I think I saw a TikTok where somebody had a timing belt at a mechanic shop and they just kept throwing it on the ground and it just kept creating these different circuits. And they just like, okay, there's another one. There's another one. I think that like designing a circuit, if you have a good, interesting area that has natural features that you can work with, that's cool.
Yeah.
However, if you're going to just have a flat surface, like the thing that he did with Coda is he like literally like they tilled the land to create these elevation changes.
They tilted the land.
They tilted the land. That sort of created the really interesting tracks that he's made. You know,
Absolutely.
have the elevation changes. But the worst ones that he's done that everybody mostly really, really hates, like Sochi and
Yas Marina.
Yas Marina, where they're just flat. You want to talk about runoff areas?
That's what I'm
like
talking
a runoff football field or multiple runoff football
Wild.
fields. That seems crazy to me.
You know what it is? Like they paid him. The Saudis are like, hey, we're going to give you money to do this. And he's like, that's a lot of money you're giving me. And here you go. You know, just.
Yeah. Can I just say
he kind of phoned it in.
I would say that out of all of his designs that he does, the one aspect of his designs that I really, really don't like, his long straights into hard right angle braking zones.
Dude, he loves it. He loves it.
It's so overdone. It's just, like I can't, like that's the most boring part of Yas Marina is that long, like freeway length straightaway. That it starts from a right angle turn and ends in a right angle turn. And it's just, why? Like, just why is that like that? Like, just, we don't need an insane heavy braking zone in order to make a passing opportunity. Like, the most exciting passes are ones that happen in more interesting turns, you know, corners. Like, I mean, I also don't like that Sochi has that big like moving circle.
Oh, yeah, that
circle in it. And it's it's not interesting, or like maybe as a driver, because I'm not a driver, I would be more excited about it. But like, visually, it just doesn't feel like it does anything interesting.
Sure. And if you guys aren't picking up on this, this is what I'm talking about. A lot of the Hermann Tilke design tracks are either loved or hated. There doesn't really seem to be an in between with them. Maybe the elements, right? Maybe the track overall, you're like, it's fine, but then people say like, I love this part or I hate this part, right? And Abu Dhabi, that is the Yas Marina circuit. He designed that, and that has historically been known to produce some of the most milquetoast racing ever, right? Minus the 2021 GP, because that was the whole red flag incident with Go Tiffy. That was not actually related to the racing on track.
Go Tiffy. Go Tiffy. Mess up the championship for Lewis Hamilton.
You know, I
definitely not how it went down.
Yeah, Latifi is a good guy, and it's really sad that all happened to him. All the blowback that he got from that whole incident, like, it's ridiculous.
It's like that Cinderella song. You don't know what you got till it's gone. I kind of miss Latifi.
Wait, is that Cinderella?
That's Cinderella. Don't know what you got till it's gone.
I was thinking of A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes. That's not even Cinderella. That's Disney.
No, yeah.
No. Anyways.
No, Idris. No, Cinderella is the name of an 80s glam rock metal band.
It clicked when you started saying it. I was I was thinking like Disney Cinderella, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. Well, just a little side note, I definitely miss Latifi.
For sure.
I kind of wish that we had him instead of either. Well, I mean, I don't know. It sucks. It's like we only had a few races, but like I'm not like stoked on De Vries and like Piastri. Like,
well, neither's Red Bull. Yeah, just Abu Dhabi has just produced some milquetoast racing, right? And so I think the Tilke tracks have just kind of gained a reputation for being like wah wah, right?
And when you have guys like Jackie Stewart telling your track sucks, I would be hurt by that.
And Mark Webber. And those are people of the earth. You know what I mean? They're us. They're us.
Yes,
they might be loaded, but
we are Jackie Stewart.
I am Jackie.
But the other thing I would say, so Tilke has he has some racing experience. Is that right?
Yeah, he has some racing experience.
Informs his stuff. What was he racing in?
Endurance racing, and he did the 24 Hours of Nürburgring.
Okay.
Yeah, and he competed in touring car racing in the 80s. So
okay.
Yeah, that it makes sense. And I think what's really cool about this is that he speaks about how him racing the track allows him to get a more innate feel. And I think it makes sense that he has that history and in that experience, he can leverage it when designing a track to know like what feels good, right? There's a really, really great article that was written up or interview that he participated in with Porsche that kind of talked about his philosophy when designing a good racetrack. And this is a quote here. So the question was, when you think of how to design a racetrack, what for you does it need to have to be a good one? And he responded, the most important thing is the third dimension when driving, that you feel a compression as if the car is dropping into a hole, or when you drive over a crest and you feel raised up, similar to a roller coaster. I just added that bit. But what's also really important for the driver to feel that dynamism is the cross slope of the bend. For this, you have to be very detail focused during planning when it comes to what's happening in the car in terms of driving dynamics. So off-camber curves, that is curves with an incorrect cross slope that cause you to oversteer, or curves with banking. The exact opposite are just two options available in track design. So you can see that he is really leveraging his experience and expertise as someone who has hit the track before, right?
Where was this guy when Jeddah was designed?
You know what's really funny? Here's another quote from the article. And this is the question from them. You managed to create the Jeddah street circuit in an extraordinarily quick time and during a period when everyone had trouble traveling and conducting their normal business, didn't you? Mind you, this is like during COVID. This is Hermann Tilke's response. Absolutely. The first sketches of the Jeddah street circuit were started in December 2020, and the Grand Prix of Saudi Arabia took place on 5 December 2021. This is precisely what set this project apart, a complete F1 racetrack built from scratch within 1 year. That is a record achievement. So this guy did.
Yeah, well, this this also means that it was probably also built with like really intense forced labor with like horrible like working conditions and stuff.
Probably.
Because that's exactly how Qatar built all of the FIFA
the World Cup stadiums
before the World Cup. Yeah, no, that it's funny that he talks about the third dimension because really, like there's only like a handful of tracks that he has that have that third dimension because most of them are just flat surface.
Yeah.
It's like, so where was this guy? Like, are there two Zilkas, or like is there one guy that like claims to be the guy, but he actually has the real guy chained up in like a in a closet somewhere, and like the guy has to design tracks like on the spot, and he's like, oh, I guess
spaghetti.
and just like, yeah, this is the genius. He just throws the spaghetti down or whatever.
To like, sir, this is a circle. I know.
This, what we should do. We should ask our viewers. You know what? The next time you're having pasta, save one noodle and then just whip it just throw it onto your plate, and then just like
take a picture, send it in.
Take a picture, and we'll see what it like. I'll make a fake version of that racetrack in Photoshop or something and post it. And it'll be created by like Andre Spaghetti is the designer, and that's like, where'd you get your name Spaghetti? Well, I'll tell you, it's my secret.
Is that where Andretti gets their name from?
Andretti Spaghetti.
Andretti Racing.
Oh, Michael Andretti, they need to make a spaghetti line because it should be Andretti Spaghetti. How that writes itself. I mean, come on. How do you not have that? I would buy the hell out of that pasta.
Andretti Spaghetti. I would.
Andretti Spaghetti.
That would single-handedly fund their F1 entry, right? Because these guys want
for Marco's at least, the youngest Andretti. So now that we've, I think, covered most of the basis of sort of the tracks, history, design, the man who designs literally all of them.
Wait, spaghetti. Mom spaghetti.
Mom spaghetti. Let's take a moment and let's talk about our personal favorite tracks and why. I also want to kind of say this in terms of, if you were a track designer, what 3 signature things would you put in every single track?
We'd have to have the Idris.
Start with your track. Start with your the Idris, the what?
The Idris eye, man. Just the like. There's a long ramp. Straight. Yeah, long straight, and then a ramp. You go into the dot. And then, there you go. And then when you splash, you just go boop into the water. Also, this would be F1 like during like climate change time. So like you'd be like launching, and then like the driver would have like a water suit, and they'd be okay.
It's like the temperature on the track ambiently is increasing by 10 degrees every lap. So it's like whoever survives at the end gets it.
So Mad Max is really just a glimpse into the future that we're gonna have. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I did love that they Mad Max when Fury Road came out. I think the Lotus F1 team decked out a F1 car to look like a Mad Max vehicle. It was awesome.
I'm sure
I remember
they did a great
at the
job.
time I was like, "This is the crossover I want," and I think they had Mad Max on their car for like one of the races. But yeah, no. Tell us about your favorite tracks. Why? And also give us your 3 elements of design that you would if you were a designer.
Okay, so I think my favorite tracks in no order. We have Silverstone, then Suzuka, Interlagos, Zandvoort, Spa-Francorchamps, and Coda.
Why did you choose each of those tracks?
All right, so I'm gonna start at the bottom because I don't know, the reasons are easier at the bottom for some reason.
Okay.
So we'll start at Coda. I think what I really like about it is that it is a Tilke track that takes the best elements from the other tracks that are liked, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of mashes them together. And just like Gabe said, they decided that they were going to just Tilke up some earth, right? In order to get some elevation change. And I think that elevation change is what really makes that starting that turn 1, that first lap turn 1 right into the downhill portion of the track so unique and so like the signature, I think, of Coda, right? Like just seeing the car start, just come screaming off the start line, like going up, and then just hard left down. So awesome to see. And it was really cool when we went to Coda last year when we got to do the track invasion and walk down that and actually physically feel how steep of a climb that is, right, for those cars. I can't even imagine the G-forces they're feeling when they're just screaming, careening through that, right? So that's gotta feel so exciting to experience as a driver. Spa-Francorchamps, same kind of reasons. Not that we went there, because that would be money, but more just kind of that same elevation change and taking advantage of the natural environment. Zandvoort is also the same. Zandvoort was one of the first ones that popped in my head when we made this list, just because, first off, it's right by the beach, right? Like it's so cool that you have right by the water, I should say. It's like on a beach. It's on sand dunes, effectively, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so cool to just see you see sand coming onto the track a lot of the times, right, when the wind is blowing. And I think there's something really cool about just driving and racing over dune hills. And it's just a nice locale, and I think it captures some really fun, speedy racing. Interlagos, the Brazilian Grand Prix, similar reasons. Like so far, there's kind of a theme to my picks here. It's very roller coaster like for all of them. Interlagos, I think, is one of the few tracks on the calendar that actually makes sense to have a sprint race on. Why is that? Because a lot of action happens. It doesn't matter what lap. Something's going to happen because there's, again, that roller coaster feel, and there's also like space enough for overtaking. Suzuka, one of the most technical tracks on the calendar, and it goes both directions, right? It goes both directions, and it has an element of the track that, or I think it was planned to have an element of the track that goes over the other side with the bridge, if I remember correctly. But it's just it's so fun to see the racing that occurs on that track. And I think with Suzuka, I don't think I've actually ever seen a sunny Suzuka race. It's always raining, or there's always some kind of like overcast. And I think, at least from what I've been watching, I can't recall like a really sunny Suzuka.
Remember seeing, I think, at least one or two. But it is most of the time it's overcast, which because it's Japan. It's the sort of zone that it's in. Yeah. And similar to Belgium and actually the Pacific Northwest, actually.
Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that's really cool, because there's a level of strategy that you have to think about when it's overcast, right? Like the track isn't super hot, right? So you got to think about, okay, how can I best set up my car to handle and thrive on this kind of circuit? And to round out my list, Silverstone, I think I picked this one just because I really enjoy watching it. I think there's one particular moment where I was watching a race occur at Silverstone, and I was just like, I love this track. It's so fun. And that was, I think it was Silverstone 2018. It was when Kimi and Seb were on Ferrari, and you had Valtteri and Lewis on Mercedes, right? And I can't remember what the order was. I think it was like a Ferrari, Mercedes, Ferrari, Mercedes. So I think you had, it might have been Seb out in front or Lewis in front. Either way, you had both Mercedes and both Ferraris like just screaming after one another, like for like the last like 10, 15 laps of the race. And like the way the cars were just swooping around all the corners, it was just so fun. Now, what's different about this track versus the other is that it doesn't have as much elevation change, right? I mean, it was built on like an airfield, but it's just something really cool about, like, I don't know, just that the British countryside. And I think it's a well-designed racing course, even though it doesn't have as much of the elevation change as I would desire.
Yeah, I think what Silverstone does to make up for that difference in lack of elevation is that it has very technical turns. Like, remember that triple pass that Lewis made last year? That like everybody remembers. That was an incredible moment. And you don't get turns like that. You don't get moments like that if you don't have turns that are like medium grade, sort of medium speed braking zone turns, you know, to like sort of, you know, you're playing chicken with the other driver, because it's not just like the heavy braking zone and then to the turn. It's like you're just sort of like who can carry that speed into the corner more, right? Which gives that kind of dynamic to it. Silverstone's a fun track. It's not on my list, but I do like it.
All right, let's hear yours. What you got?
So my list, first and foremost, is Zandvoort. And the reason for me why I love Zandvoort is that Zandvoort is the epitome of a roller coaster track. Just those banking turns as it comes through, those swoops, it is so visually fun to watch. And I can imagine as a driver that creates the kind of challenges that it would make in order to know how to pass. I remember when they first jumped back to it, they were talking about how Fernando Alonso sort of knew how to take the turns. Like he was, he had like this different strategy that was like throwing everybody off. It was like, wow, like, you know, it's fascinating. And so, that track is, I think, really, really fun. I think the only downside is that it's like where their orange army like kind of gathers. So you get all the orange smoke, and it's like, but it's still a fun track.
Orange Nation.
Interlagos, same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's got those roller coaster moments. It's got that great elevation change, but it also does not have a crazy 90-degree angle braking zone. It does have a heavy braking zone at the end of the start finish straight, but it's not like super heavy. You gotta hit it, but there's a point where you can let loose, and then you just gotta hit those Senna S chicanes perfectly. I also really, really love how the beginning of the start finish straight is not straight. It kind of has that little curve over that they do, and then it kind of does a slight uphill. That's a very fun design. Spa, I talked about already, because the Eau Rouge corkscrew turn is amazing. Going up that elevation change, the fact that it flows through the forest, kind of just was built through sort of as like a, running through the natural sort of movement of everything was just absolutely fabulous. Coda, I definitely echo your sentiments on that. I think that first corner is so nice, where it just, that huge elevation change up to that left-hand turn is so great. But I think what I also really, really like is I like that sort of the end of the first half of that race, where they sort of have those like swoop hills coming down into the turning zones, or like those S's sort of in the middle.
Yeah.
Coda has just that little bit of like all these different racetracks put into it. It's wonderful. My next pick is a controversial one, and that's because it's Monaco. I'm a Monaco stan. I'm a Monaco ho. Okay. And it's because it's so iconic and it's so picturesque, and the screenshots from the cameras where they're positioned at the same places every time.
Yeah. And
it just, there's some of the most iconic scenes, and also it gives you such a great sense of speed through the swimming pool section. It's just, I can't not like Monaco. I just can't. But my last one was actually the Red Bull Ring. The Red Bull Ring, in a lot of ways, reminds me of Interlagos, where it has a lot of really interesting movements through the hills. It sort of has a similar thing to Coda. It's not as steep, but it still has that kind of like hill up to the turn entrance. There's lots of really interesting swooping turns. There's a lot of good places for passing on track that are not heavy braking zones. And also because it's Austria, it's just the backdrop is just absolutely phenomenal and gorgeous looking. So
absolutely.
So to answer my question of if I was a track designer, what I would do, there are 3 elements that I would want to have in every track that I design. 1, a crossover like Suzuka.
Yes. Yeah.
I love the idea of counterclockwise and clockwise tracks being in the same.
A lot of the F1 tracks like to say anti-clockwise. So
right,
anti-clockwise.
I would also love to see more banking style corners, like not a full like indie banked corner, but sort of like how Zandervoort does, where it's just sort of like just a little kind of curve dip. I think that adds a really interesting element to the driving, and I think as a driver that would create some really interesting feel. Like if you want to talk about the third dimension and movement and feel, I like the idea of a roller coaster style drop where you sort of start and then you kind of curve downward into a banking, as an elevation change, and just kind of gain a bunch of speed. Like, could you imagine that as being the start of a DRS zone? Like the detection zone is like right at the top of that turn. Then you curve downward, and just the gravity pulling you down through the curve into a straightaway. Just have all that extra speed coming into it. That would be that would be great. Yeah. I would love to see a track do something like that.
Yeah.
And then the third element for me would be like, well, I mean, I just mentioned it there, elevation change. I think elevation change makes a race very, very, very interesting. I would also just make sure that my racetrack has plenty of open areas for people to like set up tents, maybe a bunch of natural trees above, like
some shade.
Make like, kind of make sure that I like plan infrastructure to where the sun ends up setting is like behind a cluster of trees or something. So it's like easier for people to, relax or rest, or like, not be, covered in the sun. But
okay, look at you.
I would make it in the Pacific Northwest, so that would be not that difficult to, come across. So I think having your start finish straight, like kind of be like almost like lined up with like trees or like having, something just that would be a cool, unique characteristic of a race. So
it would be cool to see a circuit built in the redwoods forest, right?
Yeah.
Could you imagine that? That'd be sick.
Interesting.
Or sequoia trees.
Yeah. I'm just going to take a moment too that I will say that I do have experience in racetrack design. I actually own a private island called my island is called Bayview, and it's sponsored by the Nook Foundation. I don't know if you've heard of that. I have several animal villagers who live on my island. And on my specific island, I actually built a racetrack. It took me the better part of about 4 to 6 hours, I think. I think it was like 6 hours to do. I created the little pieces myself, and I just literally designed a racetrack on my Animal Crossings island.
That is beautiful. That is amazing.
Yeah, you can get a car in the game, but you can't drive it. It just sits there. So
man, leave it to Nintendo to like tease you with something like that, man. Like unbelievable.
If they just gave me like workable bicycles or like a scooter, that would be perfect. That's all I need to have a functional racetrack on my island.
Excellent.
So yeah, at some point I will post the dream snap of my island so that anybody out there who has Animal Crossings will be able to check out my racetrack for yourself. I'll probably I'll make maybe like an F1 or F off sign or something. I'll have to do it.
Can it help you weed your gardens?
Yeah. Well, that will be forthcoming. But now on the sort of on that subject, I do want to talk about just really briefly, just to kind of wrap this up. I want to have a little fun with this. I want to just talk briefly just about racing video games and racing video game tracks and environments. And the first thing that I want to mention, and that is that Gran Turismo had one of its best features that has literally went apparently unused and unnoticed by the majority of people out there. But Gran Turismo 5, yes, Gran Turismo 5, I believe, had a racetrack builder in it. And it was really interesting because you could pick your environment. It was simple. There wasn't a lot. You could do like dirt. You could do like kind of like racetrack or
like kind of forest, European forest kind of thing.
I think no, they didn't do that. It wasn't even that creative. It was sort of like Red Bull Ring, like dirt track, or I think maybe it was ice track. I don't remember. But anyway, the way that they did it was that you could pick the number of curves. You could pick how wide the racetrack was, and you could adjust like how wide the racetrack was at certain curves. And then you could adjust the severity of the corner, like how complex the corner was. And I think you could adjust elevation. But
cool.
You could play around with like just making sort of like a generic kind of track just based on inputting numbers into a system, kind of like how they do with AI, except, this is fun.
And ethical.
And like part of me, like I think I still have Gran Turismo 5 and my PlayStation 3. At least I think I do. I know I have my PS3. But anyway, like it would be nice to revisit that because I feel like that was such a cool thing. And I am genuinely surprised why more racing games do not have a track building mechanic in it. Because I think that would be really, really, really cool. I mean, like, what is a Tony Hawk's game without a skate park building mechanic? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And without Darth Maul as an unlockable character.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Darth Maul was unlockable, and then the 4, I think, had Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the other sort of aspect of like kind of driving or gaming racing environments I want to talk about, we mentioned it briefly, is because we definitely talked about how dangerous Rainbow Road was. The
So
FIA
true.
would definitely not have approved of Rainbow Road.
No.
The too much, literally too much elevation change. Big open parts where there's not a runoff area. There's not a wall. It's just a void of nothing.
Yeah. And if you're playing the N64 version, just galaxy constellations of the characters in the game and fireworks.
At least this N64 version had walls, so like there wasn't
That's
completely
true.
open.
Man, the later ones, woo.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to tell you. Out of all the Rainbow Roads that you can remember driving, which one do you think was the most fun? Like, which one do you enjoy the most?
Ooh. I think the one that I enjoyed the most, it was the most difficult initially. Well, no, I take that back. I think the most difficult one is probably Mario Kart 8 Rainbow Road.
Yeah.
Like that's just like satellite stations. It's not even fun.
No, you have to position your car perfectly.
It's awful.
Or else you're off the track. No matter
It's
what.
awful.
Yeah.
I would say my favorite Rainbow Road would probably be Double Dash.
I was
Like
gonna say that.
once I got used to it, like that nice, like when you go off the start line and you go, I think you start banking left and you start swooping down like that corkscrew spiral. Once you figure out how to drift in that game and understand like the mechanics as far as driving is concerned, yeah, that's the most fun.
Yep.
Easily.
I was going to say Double Dash Rainbow Road is definitely a personal favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I absolutely hated the original Mario Kart Rainbow Road because it's just all just like flat right angle turns.
Are we talking Super Nintendo? Or are we talking Nintendo 60? Okay, all right.
I'm talking like the original game, which, fun fact, was supposed to be a Formula One game originally.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it was built as. But then they were like, like we should maybe try something a little fun with this.
Spice
and
it
then
up.
They just like turned it into like Mario characters, and there you go. Although I do think that would have worked really awesome as a F1 game if I'm being honest.
Absolutely.
Even just with the drifting mechanic in it, which has been cool as hell.
I would say the racing game that kind of still has that spirit of sorts would be like Horizon Chase Turbo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well. The thing that's fun about that game reminds me a lot of Outrun because it's sort of that like you only pick like certain parts of the track. You kind of have to like. It's not like you're not actually completely turning yourself. It's more like you're just like picking the lane that you're in, sort of thing. But yeah, the one game whenever I think of like environments that are like breaking the laws of physics all the time, the only ones I really think of is like the Cruisin' series.
Oh yeah,
because man, like
absolutely.
Once you get to Cruisin' Exotica, you're on like Mars. You're like driving underwater. You're like blowing up Las Vegas, which is probably what's gonna end up happening when they race there.
Gabe loves Vegas. He can't wait.
Can't you tell?
He can't wait to be the first person
Las Vegas
on that track.
Here, I will tell you what, two of my favorite all-time movies involved Las Vegas, and that's Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13. I really like those movies a lot.
Was Ocean's 12 too artsy for you as well?
It just moved a little too far away from what I liked. It was too artsy in a sense of like you could tell they were going for a very specific aesthetic of the time.
Yeah.
The thing I liked about Ocean's 13 is that it sort of felt like the original. It like kind of returned to that kind of like classic feeling and formula of Vegas heist thing. But I also love the idea that they weren't really in it for the money. They were in it for revenge, and I think that's the fun part about that whole thing.
Right.
And Al Pacino in that is so good. I'm curious as to hear everybody's opinions on the best memories they have, even whether it's Mario Kart, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, like, what's if you are a person who plays, racing games growing up. I certainly did.
Or arcade games too.
Or arcade games even.
Whatever.
Yeah, like your favorite, like, was it the Daytona arcade racer game? Was it Hydro Thunder?
Thunder.
Our first band was almost named after a Hydro Thunder boat. Remember that? We were always going to be called Rad Hazard was going to be the name.
Was that the name you submitted?
We were going to do, it was either going to be Rad Hazard, New Shoe Delivery.
New Shoe Delivery was the one I remember.
Or what we decided on was the Astro Vans, which I really wish I could reappropriate as a band name because I still think it's wonderful. Rad Hazard was the boat. My favorite thing about Hydro Thunder that I still remember to this day, and because I bought that for you on Sega.
Yeah.
When you go to the pick your characters, like choose your boat, and then when you go to the expert ones, it's like you're crazy. That's my favorite thing. That's just like instead of like it's just the way that's like you just warn people. You knew what you were getting into. Like when you were a kid, you're like, oh no, I didn't want to pick that. It's too scary.
Yeah.
But then like if you wanted that thirst for adventure, it's just like you're crazy. You're just like damn right I am. Click,
but that's when you start owning your own money or getting your own money, right? Because back then you'd have to pay like $1 to play the game, and you have to bug your parents. Can I have $3?
I still wish that those games issued out tickets depending on how would you win, because that was the one thing that's a bummer. It's like you spend your Dave and Buster's points to play that.
Yeah,
you never got tickets from it. I do miss the days where you had physical tickets. Now they just put them all on the card. The physical tickets were the best thing.
It's not the same.
There was a sense of power and like just like badassery. You just walk around with this giant wad of tickets. And you're just everybody's looking at you and just like, yes, I'll take the PlayStation. Thank you.
It's like, oh, actually, you only have enough for just the box. The PlayStation itself is going to be 3 times as many.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. One thing that I just want to inform everybody, just real quick, we're gonna wrap up here, but I just wanted to get everybody excited that Idris and I have been talking, and there's a few things that we're going to be doing with the pod coming into the future. Hopefully, obviously we're working on potential merch stuff, but we also are going to potentially be uploading all of our episodes onto YouTube as a new platform, which could be fun.
Yeah, get ready.
And that will obviously, I think, hopefully make it a little more accessible for some other people, and just
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to do is we're excited to try and get more sort of audience participation things in. And one thing that we want to start doing is actually watching racing or race related movies and then doing episodes where we talk about them and review them. So if any of you out there have a movie idea or suggestion that you would like us to listen to, please do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think this is also appropriate considering that Brad Pitt is doing that new movie with the racing one, which is supposed to be the most accurate racing movie ever made. And I was like, okay, but I'm doing air quotes for you audio listeners. Well, there's no visual listeners. What am I saying? But yeah, I'm doing air quotes there about that. But yeah, so if you have any ideas, any suggestions, please let us know. That would be wonderful. And we will take your suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seriously.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, this has been a really fun one. We hope you guys were able to learn a little bit about track history and track design and just everything that goes into it. For those of you that are wondering after hearing all this, how do I become a track designer? Well, honestly, there is no degree in that. But what you can do is become a civil engineer who focuses on geotechnical physics and maybe do some architecture. And I think, a mixture of those two disciplines would really set you on track to become a track designer. So, yeah, I think if you take that path, you'll be pretty happy.
You'd be miles ahead of the competition.
You'd be miles ahead of the competition, leaving people in your dust. Thanks everyone for listening to F1 or F Off. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, all at F1 or F Off. Email us at F1 or F Off podcast at gmail.com and give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to share with family and friends because it's the right thing to do.
It's the responsible thing to do.
It is. It really is.
Be responsible, people. Listeners, don't be irresponsible.